Hello everyone, welcome back to another video. Donald Trump is meeting Benjamin Netanyahu with Steve Witkoff today in the United States, and the person from the United States administration who is in charge of the case of those who are kidnapped or prisoners of war inside of the Gaza Strip. There were multiple reports and indications that these talks are going to be focusing on the issue that they have with Iran, the tensions between Israel and Turkey, and other subjects too, including the trade with the new tariffs imposed by the United States administration against the whole world. But they will be focusing on Gaza. And there was also a statement coming from Donald Trump today that indicates that this is what they will be talking about. Donald Trump was asked what they will be speaking about in this meeting between him and Benjamin Netanyahu, and he said that they will be talking about the obvious issue, trade and the obvious issue. That was with the response that came from President Donald Trump. However, there are more interesting things coming from Israel. For example, the fact that the meeting that is taking place between the Trump administration and Benjamin Netanyahu, it came in a very rushed manner. It was an emergency meeting. It wasn't a visit. The fact that Benjamin Netanyahu is going to remain there only for that meeting and then go back, that also indicates that everything is rushed. And it's as if Benjamin Netanyahu was called to this meeting by the United States administration. What does that all mean? And what does it mean with the other reports that are coming from Israel about the IDF now all of a sudden talking about the need to get in aid, and they're discovering more things about the military campaign in Gaza, similar to what I've been talking to you about the past couple of weeks, no strategy to defeat Hamas in the recent escalation. I'm going to try and clarify everything for you in this video. So we're going to start off with one of the reports inside of Israel saying that even without a hostage deal and without Hamas decision, the IDF is preparing to resume aid to Gaza. And in this report that was published in the Israeli newspaper Ynet, they spoke about multiple important things, many important things, including the aid to Gaza, the fact that there are already pilots now to get aid into the Gaza Strip, and the fact that there is no military strategy to defeat Hamas. That's something that I've been saying for several weeks, ever since Israel began this bombardment and genocide again against the civilians. They have no strategy against the fighters of the resistance. They only have a strategy to apply pressure on Hamas to go ahead with the deal. And this is something that they're mentioning in this report. So some of the things that they stated about this pilot is, well, firstly, that the Israeli army is supposedly applying pressure on the Israeli government, and they're saying that they need to start allowing aid in. There were official denials coming from the IDF spokesperson and the office of Benjamin Netanyahu. The IDF spokesperson said that we are following the political echelon or the political leadership, and we are not allowing aid to Hamas. And it's very important to note here, aid to Hamas. They don't have to get any aid into Hamas if they're allowing aid into Gaza. Therefore, that statement would be correct even if they are allowing aid into the Gaza Strip. And the Israeli army, they allowed a certain aid to go to certain bodies inside of the Gaza Strip who weren't necessarily aligned with Hamas. In many cases, they were criminals too, because it failed in convincing certain elements inside of the Gaza Strip to take the aid rather than, well, the official Hamas authorities who are in charge of the Gaza Strip. And in this report, they're also saying that, well, firstly, Hamas is the sovereign. We need to allow aid in. We can't go ahead without allowing any aid in, although we've had big amounts of aid going into the initial phase of the ceasefire, 4 to 5 times the numbers that were going in before, and that's accurate. Over 600 trucks a day were going into the Gaza Strip, according to Palestinian sources. At one point, they reached 800 to 900 trucks, meaning that there was aid to be stored for some period. According to the Israelis, they're saying it's enough for the Palestinians to get aid for about 50 days left. Of course, with all of that, at the end of the day, we're talking about a catastrophe, because even with that aid going in, there were still shortages in terms of medical supplies, in terms of necessities to do with the evacuation, with the rebuilding, and with taking the bodies, that thousands of bodies are under the rubble inside of the Gaza Strip, alongside fuel that wasn't going in the agreed amounts. And that's something necessary for everything to operate inside of the Gaza Strip. In this report, they're saying that the IDF is applying pressure and there is international pressure. International pressure meaning that, well, yesterday I was speaking about the fact that, okay, Donald Trump gave Israel a green light to try and apply pressure on Hamas to go into the phase 2 of the deal, something that this report is confirming, by the way. And that wasn't something without a time limit. That's the same thing that this report is saying. There is no like open option for Israel to continue with all of this bombardment for an indefinite period of time. At the end of the day, we need to start allowing aid in, because there is mounting pressure, and that pressure is primarily going to come from the United States administration, because, well, the United States is being criticized for what it's doing inside of the Gaza Strip, and they can't go on forever banning aid from the people. Now, one of the interesting things that they said is the fact that Hamas is still the sovereign, and they are still running the show. And they also mentioned that, well, this military campaign inside of the Gaza Strip is not intended to take Hamas down. The operation, according to this report, is saying that it's not intended to overthrow Hamas. IDF does not rule out the possibility of freezing the situation if the political echelon does not order an actual renewal of the fighting. And that's a statement that is very, alarming, at least internally. The IDF is, what do they mean by freezing the situation? Not listening to orders. There are problems that are reported anyway with relation to Israelis refusing to serve, but this is even more significant. And they continued, this is because the goal of the current operation in the Gaza Strip under Operation Might and Sword is not to overthrow Hamas and defeat it militarily. And that's something that I've been saying for a couple of weeks now. They do not have a strategy to defeat Hamas because they're not fighting them. That's why we haven't seen videos of the resistance fighting, because they weren't fighting them. They were simply having airstrikes, and their presence inside of the Gaza Strip is in certain parts that have far less risk of being attacked by the Palestinian resistance. Yet despite that, they still had 2 attacks against them. And the Palestinian resistance resorted to launching missiles at Israel, again indicating that they are, well, not doing much inside, because the Israelis are not coming near them. Israel knew that Hamas and the Palestinian resistance took all of this time to prepare for the next round, and they know that they don't have enough people to go and fight. There is no willingness to fight. They had to bring Division 36 from the borders of Lebanon, and there are massive numbers who are refusing to serve. So they're confirming in this report that the role, that the operation now, the aim is not to defeat Hamas militarily and defeat it, but to try and pressure it to move forward with another step in a deal that will buy both sides more time to continue the current situation. And according to them, to this report, if we get used to the current situation, we will remain unchanged for a long period of time. Hamas is not defeated and controls Gaza. The abductees are in the towns. The IDF soldiers hold 20-30% of the territory, with relative security come from the Gaza Strip in the background. Okay, what does all of that mean? Well, that means that there is certain pressure, that, well, there is a deadline, at least when it comes to the United States administration, despite their complicity in the genocide. And that this meeting that Benjamin Netanyahu is due to have with Donald Trump today is going to be focusing primarily on Gaza, rather than all of the other subjects to do with Iran and Turkey, even the trade. So in Israel, they're feeling that they need to take certain steps. That's why they're talking about a pilot for aid going inside of the Gaza Strip, saying that it's already taking place, according to that report. And they are looking into having the IDF directly giving the aid to the Palestinian people. And that's something, by the way, that is unrealistic. What they're trying to do here is prepare the public opinion for the allowing of the aid to go back inside of the Gaza Strip. And they are confirming that some aid is going in particular inside of the Rafah area. That's an area that Israel besieged. Well, they're committing war crimes every day. Today there was a report of them targeting a tent having journalists inside of it. They killed over 200 journalists so far. And what we understand is, well, the time limit is coming closer to an end. Coming closer to an end after all of this period failed in making Hamas kneel down and submit to the will and the demands of Israel after it started to attack the civilian population again, trying to use that as leverage against Hamas, hoping that they will start adding more pressure against Hamas internally and making people feel helpless and hopeless that Israel will always be there and they will not leave Gaza, and Gaza destroyed is there and there is no hope. And they are trying to capitalize on those with the weak ones, really, who constantly follow the propaganda of Israel, saying that, oh yeah, well, look what they're doing, and at the end of the day, the Hamas, they need to step down and leave everything. It isn't going to stop. Even if Hamas give Gaza now, that's not going to stop. And we have a very big example in the West Bank. We've had 60,000 people approximately being expelled from their homes now. And guess what? There was killing and kidnapping every single day before the 7th of October in the West Bank. That is ruled by a man who is a puppet to Israel. So people need to understand that. The interesting things are ahead of us. So after this meeting, and Donald Trump, by the way, is saying that in that previous report, said that we need to keep things secret. We can't talk about all of the things that we're going to be speaking about in the meeting, even when he said we're going to talk about the obvious subject. Why would he say that, we're going to talk about the obvious subject rather than directly talk exactly what they're going to talk about? And then he also said in that statement, lots of things are happening in the Middle East. We don't have to make noise. Again, so all of a sudden he's changing his tone now. And he said as well in that same statement, that same person who is constantly warning, we didn't have a problem with Iran and we didn't have a problem with anyone. And then 7th of October happened, according to him. And he's blaming Biden again for giving Iran money because of a previous deal that he had with them. It's like you're striving for a deal, although this striving for a deal with Iran is aligned or coupled with direct threats against Iran. Well, they're going to have money as well from your deal too. So all of these things indicate that, well, the prospect of a de-escalation is still there, despite all of the catastrophe and all of the problems. Many people weren't thinking that we're going to reach phase one. Again, that's not to sound hopeful or optimistic or anything of the sort. But what people need to understand is that this cannot go on forever. Israel wants to portray it as if it can go on forever. It cannot go on forever. So the outcome of this meeting is going to be very tough to kind of understand, because I don't expect that a lot is going to be published after that. But if there has been an agreement or a decisive measure being taken by the United States administration, similar to that decision when they forced Benjamin Netanyahu to go into a phase one or the ceasefire that they later breached, then we might see things happening. Israel, there are talks about potentially reaching a deal before the holidays, and that's going to happen very soon. And they're talking about a potential deal within either days or weeks. So interesting things. We're going to have to monitor what's going to happen with the Trump meeting with Benjamin Netanyahu, what comes out of it, and what people need to understand as well is there might be a case where not a lot is being said, but certain actions are being implemented on the ground. Similar to a previous phase that took place approximately a year ago after the initial temporary ceasefire ended, when there were certain movements happening on the ground without any declaration of a ceasefire. There was a period in 2024 where the attacks became less. People were allowed to go back to the north. More aid was going inside of the Gaza Strip, and there were prisoners being released from both sides without anyone declaring anything. And that was due to certain understandings that took place between the mediators and between the United States and Israel too. We could see something similar to that, or we could see a decisive measure being taken that forces Israel to go ahead and understand that that's it. We're going into phase two. We're going to have to declare that the war has ended and then wait for the next challenges to come after that.